The valley held its breath in the hours before dawn. Caleb Vance had been awake since 3, same as always. Sleep came in fragments now, an hour here, 40 minutes there, shallow enough that the creak of a floorboard 2 rooms away would snap his eyes open. Old habits, the kind that burrowed into your bones and nested there permanently. He stood at the kitchen window, coffee going cold in his hand, watching the tree line. The horses were restless. He'd heard them shifting in the barn, hooves scraping wood, that low, anxious sound they made when something wasn't right. Could have been a coyote. Could have been the wind changing. Could have been nothing. Except Caleb Vance didn't believe in nothing. He set the cup down, pulled his coat from the hook, and stepped into the brittle cold. Frost crunched under his boots. The stars were sharp overhead, that particular clarity you only got in mountain country when the temperature dropped below freezing. His breath came out in clouds. 43 degrees by his guess. Maybe 40. The barn sat 200 yards from the house, dark except for the single lantern he'd left burning near the tack room. He walked slowly, listening. The horses had gone quiet. That was worse than the noise. Halfway across the yard he stopped. Fresh tracks in the frost. 3 sets, maybe 4. Men on foot, moving careful, spacing themselves wide. They'd come from the north ridge, using the rocks for cover, probably watching the house for the last hour. Professional work. Not drifters looking for an easy meal. His jaw tightened. The barn door hung open 6 inches. He'd latched it himself before midnight. He always latched it. Caleb didn't rush. Rushing got you killed. He moved to the side wall, pressed his back against the wood, listened. Inside, low voices, the jingle of tack being stripped from hooks, a horse snorting nervously. At least 4 men, maybe 5. He could have gone back to the house, grabbed the Winchester, come back shooting. That's what the old Caleb would have done. The one who'd tracked 37 men to their deaths across 6 territories and never lost a single trail. The one they'd called the Reaper. But he'd buried that man 15 years ago, along with most of the things that mattered. Almost. He eased around the corner, moving silent, and slipped through the gap in the door. The interior swam with shadows. The lantern cast everything in shades of orange and black. 4 men, no, 5, working quickly, efficiently. 2 were bridling horses, rough but competent. 1 stood watch near the back door. 2 others were in the stalls at the far end, and Caleb's chest went tight when he saw which stall. Juniper, the big roan stallion, 15 hands high, coat like burnished copper in the lamplight. She'd raised that horse from a colt, spent 2 years training him, gentle as anything. Last living piece of her Caleb had left. One of the men had a rope on him already. "Easy now," the man was saying, voice low. "Easy, boy. Nobody's gonna hurt you." Caleb stepped into the light. "That's real comforting," he said. All 5 men spun. Guns came up. 3 pistols, 1 rifle. The man with the rifle was young, maybe 22, with a scar running through his left eyebrow. The one who'd been talking to Juniper was older, weathered, the kind of face that had seen violence and learned to like it. "Well now," the older man said, "thought you'd sleep through this part." "I'm a light sleeper. That's unfortunate." The man didn't lower his gun. None of them did. "For you, I mean. We were hoping to keep this civil." "Civil," Caleb repeated. His eyes moved across them, cataloging. The young one with the rifle was nervous, finger too tight on the trigger. The one by the back door kept glancing at it. Escape route. His responsibility. The other 2 were steady, experienced. Ex-military, maybe. The kind who'd done worse than steal horses and slept fine after. "You're going to want to turn around," the older man said. "Walk back to your house. Pour yourself another cup of coffee. Give us 15 minutes. We're gone. You never saw us. Simple." "Can't do that." "Sure you can. You're 1 man. We're 5. Math's pretty clear." Caleb's gaze settled on Juniper. The stallion's ears were pinned back, eyes rolling white, scared. "You take any of the others, I'll let it go, but not him." The man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "See, that's the problem. Him's exactly why we're here. Heard about this horse 3 states over. Bloodline goes back to the old cavalry stock, trained perfect, worth more than this whole ranch twice over. So we're taking him. And the others, because waste not. And you're going to let us because you're smart enough to know when you're beat. I've been beat before, Caleb said quietly. Didn't take. Something shifted in the air. The young one with the rifle tensed. The one by the door straightened. They'd all felt it, that change, like a wire pulled taut. The older man's smile faded. Who are you, old-timer? Nobody anymore. That's supposed to scare me? No. Caleb's voice was flat, empty. Just a fact. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then the older man's expression hardened. Take him down. 3 things happened very fast. The young one with his rifle swung the barrel toward Caleb. Caleb pivoted left, inside the arc, grabbed the rifle with his left hand and drove his right elbow into the kid's throat. The rifle went off, deafening in the enclosed space, the bullet punching through the roof. Caleb ripped the weapon free, reversed it, and smashed the stock across the nearest man's jaw. Bone cracked. The man went down. The one by the door was raising his pistol. Caleb threw the rifle like a spear. It hit him square in the chest, knocked him back into the wall. His gun fired wild, high. The older man and the last one were both aiming now, too close to miss. Juniper reared. 1,600 pounds of horseflesh exploded upward in the confined stall, hooves lashing out. One caught the last man in the shoulder, spun him like a top. His shot went into the dirt. The older man jerked his aim away from Caleb, trying to track the thrashing animal, and that half-second of distraction was all Caleb needed. He closed the distance in 2 strides, grabbed the man's gun hand, twisted hard. The wrist bones gave with a wet pop. The pistol dropped. Caleb caught it before it hit the ground and laid the barrel across the man's temple. Not hard enough to kill. Hard enough to end the conversation. The man collapsed. Silence rushed back in, broken only by heavy breathing and the horses stamping nervously. Caleb stood in the center of the carnage, the pistol hanging loose in his hand. 5 men down in under 10 seconds. The old muscle memory, smooth as silk, like he'd never stopped. His hands were shaking. The young one was gasping, clutching his throat. The one who'd taken Juniper's hoof was curled on his side, whimpering. The others were out cold. Nobody was dead, but it had been close. Real close. Caleb let the pistol fall. It hit the dirt with a muffled thud. He walked to Juniper's stall. The stallion was still agitated, ears flat, but when Caleb reached out slow and steady, the horse settled. Let him close. Caleb rested his forehead against the animal's neck, breathing hard. I know, he whispered. I know. It's all right. It wasn't all right. It hadn't been all right in 15 years. Behind him, the young one finally got enough air to speak. You're him. You're the Reaper. Caleb didn't turn around. That name doesn't mean anything anymore. The hell it doesn't. They said you were dead. They said they were right. Caleb straightened, looked back at the kid. His eyes were cold, empty as winter sky. I am dead. Whatever you thought you knew, forget it. You got lucky tonight. Don't make me regret that. The kid nodded frantically. Caleb walked to the barn door, looked out at the darkness. The stars had faded. Dawn was maybe an hour off. He could see the tracks now, clear in the growing light. 5 sets coming in. But there were others, older, leading away to the north. More men. Watchers, probably. Maybe a whole crew. This wasn't random. This was organized. Someone had sent these men specifically for Juniper, which meant someone knew about the horse, knew about this ranch, maybe knew about him. He turned back to the 5 men. 3 were conscious now, all of them watching him with various expressions of pain and fear. Who sent you? He asked. The older man, cradling his broken wrist, spat blood. Go to hell. Already been. Didn't care for it. Caleb walked closer, crouched down so they were eye level. I'm asking nice. Once. Who sent you? Why do they want the horse? And how many more of you are out there? You think we're scared of you? The man's voice was tight with pain. You think you're the scariest thing we've seen? We work for people who'd burn this whole valley down and not lose sleep. You're nothing. You're a ghost story old men tell to feel important. Caleb studied him, then nodded slowly. All right. He stood, walked to the tack room, and returned with a coil of rope. Working quickly, methodically, he tied all 5 of them together, hands behind backs, connected by a single length of line. They cursed him, threatened him, told him all the ways they'd make him pay. He didn't respond. When they were secured, he walked back to the house as the sun finally broke over the eastern ridge, painting the valley in shades of gold and red. Beautiful morning. Emma would have loved it. She'd always been an early riser, said the best light was in those first few minutes after dawn. Inside, he poured fresh coffee, drank it standing at the window, watching the barn. The 5 men weren't going anywhere. He had time to think. Someone wanted Juniper badly enough to send a professional crew. That meant money, serious money, and organization. You didn't coordinate a raid like this, timed, planned, with multiple men and escape routes, unless you had resources. But it was the other detail that bothered him. The thing the older man had said. We work for people who'd burn this whole valley down. Not just thieves, then. Something bigger. And if they'd come once, they'd come again. He set the coffee down, walked to his bedroom, and opened the closet. Most of it was ordinary. Work clothes, a winter coat, boots. But at the back, hidden behind a loose board, was a leather satchel. He hadn't touched it in 15 years. His hands hesitated on the buckle. Then he opened it. Inside, a worn notebook filled with names and locations, most of them crossed out. A collection of old badges from territories that didn't exist anymore. 3 maps, heavily annotated. A silver pocket watch that had stopped at 11:43 15 years ago and never started again. And at the bottom, wrapped in oilcloth, a pair of revolvers. Custom made, perfectly balanced, handles worn smooth from years of use. He'd sworn he'd never touch them again. Swore it on Emma's grave the day he buried her. But promises to the dead didn't mean much when the living came kicking down your door. He lifted one of the guns, felt the weight of it. Familiar. Comfortable. Wrong. A sound from outside, horses approaching. Multiple riders. Caleb moved to the window. 6 men on horseback coming up the valley road at a steady pace. They weren't trying to hide. That meant they either didn't know about the 5 in the barn, or they didn't care. He counted weapons. Rifles across saddles, pistols on hips. One of them had a shotgun strapped to his back. They rode with the easy confidence of men who expected trouble and welcomed it. The lead rider was tall, lean, with a face like carved granite. He wore a black duster and a flat-brimmed hat, and when he pulled up in front of the house, his eyes went straight to the barn. Caleb opened the door, stepped out onto the porch. The 2 revolvers were tucked in his belt, hidden under his coat. "Morning," the tall man said. His voice had a strange accent, European maybe. "You the owner here?" "I am." "Name's Kane. I'm looking for some associates of mine, 5 men. They were supposed to complete a transaction and return before dawn. They didn't." "Transaction," Caleb repeated. "The purchase of livestock. Horses, specifically." Kane's eyes never left Caleb's face. "I don't suppose you've seen them?" "Might have." "Might have." Kane smiled. It was the kind of smile a snake would give if snakes could smile. "That's interesting, because I'm looking at your barn right now and I see the doors open. I see tracks in the frost. I see signs of a struggle. So let me ask you different. Where are my men?" "Tied up," Caleb said. "In the barn. Alive, if you're curious." The other 5 riders shifted. Hands moved toward weapons. Kane held up one hand and they froze. "You're either very brave or very stupid. I'm trying to decide which." "Neither. Just a man who doesn't like thieves." "Thieves?" Kane's smile widened. "Is that what you think this is? A simple robbery? Oh, friend, you have no idea what you've stepped into." "Then explain it to me." "No." Kane gathered his reins. "No, I don't think I will. Instead, I'm going to give you a choice. You release my men, we take the horses we came for, and you live. Simple transaction. Or you refuse and we kill you and take them anyway. Less simple, more permanent. What's it going to be?" Caleb looked at the 6 men, at the guns, at the cold certainty in Kane's eyes. He thought about Emma, about the quiet life they'd built here, about all the years he'd spent trying to be someone different. Then he thought about Juniper, about the 5 men who'd invaded his barn, about the way Kane said transaction, like it was something clean and legal instead of what it actually was. Theft, violence, the kind of thing he'd spent half his life hunting, the kind of thing he'd sworn to walk away from. "Third option," Caleb said quietly. Kane raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." "You leave. Now. Empty-handed. I keep your men until the sheriff gets here, and you disappear before I decide to make this personal." For a moment, Kane just stared at him. Then he started laughing. It was a genuine sound, surprised and delighted. Oh, that's wonderful. That's truly wonderful. Do you know who I work for, old man? Do you have any concept of the machinery you're throwing yourself against? Don't care. You should. Kane's laughter died. My employer controls most of the trade in this territory. Cattle, timber, horses, minerals, all of it. What we want, we take. What we take, we keep. And right now we want that roan stallion in your barn. So you can posture all you like, but the reality is simple. You're one man. We're an army. You can't win. Maybe not. Caleb's hand moved to his belt, rested on the grip of one revolver. Not drawing, just ready. But I can make you pay for it. Something flickered in Kane's expression. Recognition, maybe. Or memory. His eyes narrowed. You're him. The tracker. Vance. I heard you were dead. Heard that a lot lately. Should have stayed that way. Kane's voice went flat, professional. Kill him. The 5 riders drew their weapons. Caleb drew faster. The first shot took the man on the far left, the one with the shotgun, in the shoulder. He toppled backward off his horse. The second shot hit the rider next to him in the thigh. Horse reared. Man fell. Return fire erupted. Bullets punched through the porch railing, shattered the window behind Caleb. He was already moving, diving left, rolling, coming up in a crouch. 2 more shots. One hit a horse, not fatal, just enough to make it panic and throw its rider. The other took the 4th man in the hand. His pistol flew. 5 seconds. 4 men down. The last rider and Cayenne were both firing now. Controlled bursts, professional. Caleb scrambled behind the water trough. Bullets spanged off metal. Wood splinters exploded. He popped up, fired once, missed, dropped back down. His ears were ringing. The cordite smell was thick, familiar. His hands weren't shaking anymore. Persistent, Kane shouted. I'll give you that. Caleb didn't answer. He was counting rounds. 4 left in the right gun, 5 in the left. 9 total. 2 targets still mounted. The firing stopped. Reload time. Caleb stood, both guns up, and walked forward. Deliberate, steady. Kane's horse was dancing sideways. The last rider was fumbling with his rifle, trying to clear a jam. Caleb put a bullet past Kane's head, close enough to take his hat off, and pointed the other gun at the rider. Drop it, he said. The rider looked at Kane. Kane looked at Caleb. The math was simple now. 3 guns on target versus 2 men in the open. Bad odds. Kane's jaw tightened. Then he smiled again, that snake smile. All right, you've made your point. We're leaving. Your men stay. That wasn't part of this. It is now. Caleb's voice was ice. Take your wounded. Leave the rest. And when you report back to whoever's pulling your strings, you tell them something for me. What's that? Tell them Caleb Vance is still breathing. And if they come at me again, they better bring more than 11 men. Kane stared at him for a long, measured moment. Then he nodded once. You're making a mistake. You think you've won something here, but all you've done is paint a target on your back so big they'll see it from 3 states over. Let them look. Kane wheeled his horse. The last mounted rider followed. They gathered up the 4 wounded men. 3 could ride, 1 had to be tied across a saddle, and turned north. Before they disappeared over the ridge, Kane looked back once. This isn't over, he called. I know, Caleb said. Then they were gone, and he was alone in the yard with 4 dead horses, blood in the frost, and the smell of gunpowder hanging in the air. The sun was fully up now. The valley was beautiful in the morning light, just like always, like nothing had happened. Caleb walked back to the barn. The 5 men tied inside were silent now, watching him with new eyes, fear, respect, calculation. He ignored them, went to Juniper's stall. The stallion was calm again. Caleb ran a hand down his neck, checking for injuries. Nothing serious, some scrapes, some anxiety. He'd be fine. We're in it now, Caleb said softly. Both of us. Juniper huffed, pushed his nose into Caleb's shoulder. Outside, the sound of hoofbeats. For a moment, Caleb tensed. Then he recognized the rhythm. Single rider, older horse, steady pace. He walked to the barn door, looked out. Sheriff Tom Braddock was coming up the road, his gray gelding moving at an easy walk. Tom was 60 if he was a day, with a gut that hung over his belt and a face like sun-dried leather. He'd been sheriff for 23 years and had perfected the art of seeing what he needed to see and ignoring the rest. He pulled up, looked at the blood in the yard, the bullet holes in the house, the tracks leading north. Then he looked at Caleb. "Morning, Caleb." "Tom." "Heard gunfire. Figured I'd check it out." He shifted in his saddle. "Want to tell me what happened?" "Horse thieves," Caleb said. 11 of them. 6 rode off. 5 are in the barn." Tom's eyebrows went up. 11 men. Give or take. And you're standing here, not bleeding, with 5 prisoners. "That's right." Tom was quiet for a moment. Then he sighed, climbed down from his horse. "Caleb, I'm going to need you to be straight with me. Is this about to become a problem?" "Already is a problem." "Bigger problem, then. The kind where I have to call in federal marshals and explain why there's a small war happening in my jurisdiction." Caleb met his eyes. "They came for Juniper. Said they worked for someone big. Someone who controls trade in the territory. They'll be back." "Jesus." Tom rubbed his face. "You got names?" Leader called himself Cain, European accent. The others didn't introduce themselves. "Cain." Tom's expression went dark. "Tall? Black duster? Face like he's been carved out of stone?" "You know him." "Know of him. He's muscle for the Crane Company. Big trading outfit out of Denver. Legal on paper, but everyone knows they're dirty as hell. Extortion, intimidation, claim jumping, price fixing, you name it. They've done it. But they're careful. Always stay just on the right side of the law, or at least far enough that nobody can prove otherwise." "They just tried to rob me." "Yeah, and they'll claim it was a misunderstanding, or self-defense, or that you're lying." Tom shook his head. "These aren't regular outlaws, Caleb. They've got lawyers, judges, politicians. They don't fight with guns. Well, not only with guns. They fight with paperwork and influence. You kill one of their men, they'll sue you. You embarrass them, they'll ruin you. And if that doesn't work, they'll send more men, better men. Then I'll deal with them too. Will you?" Tom's voice was gentle. "Because the man I knew who could handle that kind of heat, he walked away 15 years ago. Said he was done. Said he wanted peace. Was that a lie?" Caleb looked at the valley. At his house, his land, the barn where Emma's horse stood waiting, the quiet life they'd built together. No, not a lie. But peace only worked when the other side agreed to leave you alone. "They made the choice," he said finally. "Not me." Tom studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded. "All right, show me the prisoners." They spent the next hour documenting everything. Tom took statements from the 5 men in the barn, all of whom claimed they were just hired hands, didn't know anything about any crane company, were just following orders. Tom didn't believe them, but he wrote it down anyway. "I'll take them back to town," he said. "Lock them up, file charges. But Caleb, you need to think about what comes next. These people don't quit, and they don't forgive." "Neither do I." Tom looked like he wanted to say something else. Instead, he just shook his head, helped load the 5 prisoners onto horses, and led them away down the valley road. Caleb watched them go. Then he walked back to the house, cleaned his guns, and started making plans. Because Tom was right about one thing, this wasn't over. The Crane Company, or whoever was really behind this, they'd come again. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next week, but eventually. And when they did, Caleb would be ready. Not as the scared rancher they'd thought they were robbing, as the hunter he'd tried so hard to bury. He spent the rest of the day working, fixed the bullet holes in the porch, replaced the shattered window, cleaned the blood from the frost before it stained. By evening, you could barely tell anything had happened. But Caleb knew. He'd crossed a line this morning, picked up the guns again, let the old reflexes take over. And that door, once opened, was hard to close. He stood on the porch as the sun set, watching the valley turn purple in the fading light. Somewhere out there, Cain was reporting to his employers, telling them about the man who'd fought off 11 of them, about Caleb Vance, the Reaper, who wasn't as dead as everyone thought. And somewhere, in an office or a mansion or a smoke-filled room, someone was making decisions. Plans, calculations. They'd underestimated him once. They wouldn't make that mistake twice. Caleb smiled, cold and humorless, and walked inside. He had work to do, because if they wanted a war, he'd give them one. Not the way they expected, not loud and bloody and obvious, quiet, patient, surgical. The way he'd done it before. The way that had made 37 men disappear and never be found. He pulled out the old notebook, flipped through pages of names and faces, most of them long dead. Then he turned to a fresh page and wrote one word at the top, Crane, and below it, in smaller letters, find the head, cut it off, watch the body fall. Outside, Juniper whinnied in the barn. Caleb looked up, listened. The horse was calm, just checking in. Soon, Caleb said to the empty room. We ride soon. Not to run, to hunt. 3 days passed before Caleb rode into town. He took his time getting ready, which was its own kind of strategy. Let them wonder, let them wait. Let whoever was watching, and someone was always watching, report back that the old rancher seemed calm, unbothered, like killing 11 men's plans and sending 6 of them limping home meant nothing to him. The truth was messier. His shoulder ached where he'd hit the ground during the fight. His hands had cramped up twice from gripping the revolvers too tight, muscle memory fighting against 15 years of disuse. And he'd barely slept, every sound outside jerking him awake, hand reaching for guns that now sat loaded on his nightstand instead of wrapped in oilcloth at the bottom of a closet. But nobody needed to know that. He saddled Juniper in the early morning cold, checking the horse's legs, his hooves, his temperament. The stallion was steady, calm, like the fight had never happened. Animals were better at letting things go. Caleb envied that. The ride to town took 2 hours at an easy pace. The valley opened up gradually, narrow canyon walls giving way to rolling grassland, then to the scattered buildings that made up Redemption. Population 347, according to the sign someone had painted 5 years ago and never updated. The name was supposed to be ironic, founded by ex-Confederates and former Union deserters who wanted to forget the war, but Caleb had always thought it was just optimistic. People didn't redeem themselves. They just moved somewhere new and pretended the past didn't follow. He tied Juniper outside the general store, loose enough the horse could bolt if trouble started. Old habit. The street was quiet for mid-morning, just a few wagons, some kids playing near the schoolhouse, old Mrs. Chen sweeping her porch. Normal. Too normal. Caleb's neck prickled. He walked into the store. Bell chimed overhead. Daniel Frost looked up from behind the counter, smiled, then saw Caleb's face, and the smile died. Heard you had some excitement, Daniel said carefully. He was 40, soft around the middle, had run this store since his father died. Good man, nervous man. News travels, Caleb said. Tom Braddock came through yesterday. Had 5 men in chains, told everyone there'd been trouble at your place. Said you handled it. Daniel's hands fidgeted with a ledger. Also said we should probably expect more trouble. Probably. Caleb? Daniel glanced at the door, lowered his voice. Look, I don't want problems. Most folks here don't. We just want to live quiet, you understand? I do. So maybe, if this is about to get ugly, maybe you should... He stopped, realizing what he was saying. I'm sorry. That came out wrong. No, it didn't. Caleb kept his voice even. You're scared. That's reasonable. Men with guns came to my ranch. Next time they might come here. You got a family to think about. Daniel's shoulders sagged. Yeah, I do. Sarah's pregnant again. 3rd kid. And with the store barely breaking even. He trailed off. I just can't afford to pick sides, you know? Whatever this is, I need to stay out of it. I'm not asking you to pick sides. Aren't you? Daniel met his eyes. Because that's what it feels like. Tom said these men work for Crane Company. That's big money, Caleb. That's the kind of people who don't forget grudges. And if they think this town's helping you... He didn't finish, didn't need to. Caleb nodded slowly. I need supplies. Salt, coffee, ammunition. Can you sell me those, or is that picking sides? Daniel hesitated. Then he moved to the shelves. I can do that. They completed the transaction in silence. Caleb paid cash, loaded the goods into his saddlebag, and turned to leave. At the door, he stopped. Tell Sarah congratulations, he said. I will. Daniel's voice was quiet. And Caleb? I am sorry, really. If things were different, they're not. Caleb stepped outside. The street was still quiet, but now he could feel it. Eyes watching from windows. People seeing him, recognizing him, then finding somewhere else to be. Mrs. Chen had gone inside. The kids had disappeared. He was poison. Just by being here, he was making the town vulnerable. He untied Juniper, started to mount, and heard a voice behind him. Caleb Vance, He turned. A woman stood 10 feet away, mid-30s, dressed in riding clothes with dark hair pulled back and eyes that were sharp as cut glass. She wasn't from around here. Her boots were too expensive, her coat too well-tailored, and she was looking at him like she knew exactly who he was. "Do I know you?" Caleb asked. "No, but I know you." She walked closer, not threatening, just confident. "My name's Rebecca Marsh. I work for the Territorial Examiner. I'm a journalist." "Not interested. I haven't asked you anything yet." "Don't need to. The answer's still no." She smiled. It was a good smile, practiced but genuine. "You don't even know what I want. You want a story. Man fights off horse thieves, dramatic shootout, old legends coming back to life. Sells papers. But I'm not a story, Miss Marsh. I'm just someone trying to live quiet." "And how's that working out?" Caleb didn't answer. Rebecca took another step. "I've been investigating Crane Company for 6 months. They're dirty. Price fixing, extortion, bribing officials. But they're careful. Every time I get close to proof, it disappears. Witnesses recant, documents vanish, I'm hitting a wall." "Still not interested." 3 weeks ago, a rancher named William Torres refused to sell his land to Crane. He was found dead 2 days later. Accident, supposedly. Fell off his horse, broke his neck. Except Torres was the best rider in 2 counties, and the horse was calm when they found it. Caleb stopped with his hand on the saddle. "You're saying they killed him. I'm saying it's convenient, and he's not the first. I found 4 similar cases in the last year. All ranchers, all refused to sell, all dead within a week, all ruled accidents or natural causes. Take it to the law." "I did. Sheriff Braddock's a good man, but he's one person in 1 county. Crane operates across 3 territories, and half the judges are on their payroll. Then take it to the federal marshals." "I will. When I have proof they can't ignore." She paused. "That's why I'm here." "You embarrassed them, Caleb. Publicly. They sent 11 men and you beat them. That's not something Crane forgives, which means they'll come at you again, and when they do, I'll handle it. Or you'll end up like Torres." Her voice was hard now. "Look, I'm not asking you to be a hero. I'm asking you to let me document what happens. When they make their next move, I want to be there. I want witnesses, evidence, something I can use to finally nail these people." Caleb studied her. She believed what she was saying, that much was clear. And she was right about Crane. They would come again. But letting a journalist into this? That was complicated. Messy. The kind of thing that could spiral out of control fast. "No," he said. "Why not?" "Because I work alone." "You worked alone 15 years ago, too. How'd that turn out?" The words hit like a punch. Caleb's jaw tightened. "You don't know anything about that. I know you were the best tracker in the West. I know you brought in 37 men and never lost a trail. I know you walked away after your wife died and haven't picked up a gun since." She tilted her head. "Until 3 days ago. So something changed. Question is, what?" "They came to my home. That's what changed." "Exactly. They violated the one thing you had left. And now you're going to fight back. Which is good, but you can't do it alone, Caleb, not against something this big." He wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she was wrong, that he'd handled worse odds, that he didn't need help from some journalist looking for a headline. But the truth, the part he didn't want to admit, was that she had a point. Crane Company wasn't just outlaws. It was a machine. Guns and lawyers and politicians all working together. You couldn't just shoot your way through something like that. You needed leverage, information, proof. "If I say yes," he said slowly, "you follow my rules. You don't publish anything without my approval. You don't put yourself in danger, and if I tell you to leave, you leave. No arguments." Rebecca's eyes lit up. "Deal." "I didn't say yes yet, but you're going to." She smiled. "Because you're smart enough to know you need allies. And I'm the best chance you've got at making sure Crane doesn't just kill you quietly and bury the story." Caleb shook his head. "You're persistent. It's kind of my job." "Fine, but we do this my way." "Understood." She pulled a notebook from her coat. So what's the plan? First, I need information. You said you've been investigating them for 6 months. What do you know about their operation? Structure, leadership, how they move money? Rebecca flipped through pages covered in cramped handwriting. The public face is Maxwell Crane. He's the founder, owns the company, rich, connected, untouchable. But the actual operations are run by a man named Victor Hale. He's the one who handles the dirty work. Hale, Caleb repeated. Tall, European accent? No, that's... Wait, did you meet someone like that? Called himself Cain, led the crew that came after me. Rebecca's expression darkened. Cain. I've heard the name. He's new, brought in about 3 months ago. Nobody knows where he came from, but people are terrified of him. Word is he's ex-military, maybe Prussian, definitely dangerous. He's professional, organized, not a regular outlaw. Which fits. Crane's been escalating. They used to just buy people out, apply pressure through legal channels. But lately they've gotten aggressive, hiring muscle, forcing sales. It's like they're in a hurry. Why the rush? That's what I've been trying to figure out. She tapped her notebook. Best guess? There's something in this territory they want, something worth risking their reputation for. But I can't figure out what. Caleb thought about Juniper, about why they'd come specifically for that horse. Bloodline, the thief had said. Cavalry stock, worth more than the ranch. But that didn't make sense. A horse was a horse. Even a good one wasn't worth this level of risk, unless it wasn't really about the horse. They wanted my ranch, he said quietly. The horse was just the excuse. Your land? Why? It's good grazing, but there's nothing special about... She stopped. Wait, where exactly is your property? North Valley, canyon entrance, about 15 miles from here. Rebecca's eyes widened. The canyon? Caleb, do you know what's on the other side of that canyon? Mountains, wilderness, not much else. Not according to the new territorial survey. She was flipping through her notebook frantically. I saw the report last month. They found mineral deposits, copper, maybe silver. The exact location was kept quiet, but the general area was... She found the page. North of Redemption, accessible through canyon passages. Your land, Caleb. Your ranch sits on the only easy route to a potential mine worth millions. The pieces fell into place. The organized raid. The professional crew. Cain's confidence. They weren't just stealing horses. They were clearing the path. They're going to try to take it legal first, Caleb said. Make me an offer. When I refuse, they'll apply pressure. When that doesn't work, they'll kill you and claim the land through some legal loophole. Rebecca's voice was grim. It's what they did to Torres. Made him an offer. He said no. He died. They bought the land from his widow for pennies on the dollar. Torres have any family left? A sister in Denver. I interviewed her. She's convinced it was murder, but she can't prove it. Caleb was quiet for a moment, thinking. If this was about the mine, then Crane had probably already started the legal process. Claims, surveys, permits, which meant there'd be a paper trail, names, connections. I need to see those documents, he said. The survey, the land claims, everything related to this mine. They're public record, but they're filed in the territorial capital, 3-day ride from here. Then we ride. Rebecca blinked. We? You want it in. This is in. We leave tomorrow morning. Okay. Yes, absolutely. She was already making notes. I'll need to send a telegram to my editor, arrange for supplies. No telegrams, Caleb said sharply. Crane probably has people watching the telegraph office. We don't tell anyone where we're going or why. Right, of course. She looked up at him. You really think they're monitoring communications? I think they're not stupid, and neither are we. A door slammed across the street. Both of them turned. Sheriff Braddock was walking toward them, his face set in hard lines. He didn't look happy. Miss Marsh, he said when he reached them. Didn't know you were in town. Just arrived this morning, Sheriff, doing some follow-up research. Uh-huh. Tom's eyes moved to Caleb. And you, I thought I told you to keep a low profile. I needed supplies. From what I hear, you're planning a trip to the capital. That sound like keeping a low profile to you? Caleb stiffened. How did you... Because I'm a sheriff, and this is a small town, and you two have been standing in the middle of the street having what looks like a very interesting conversation for the last 10 minutes. Tom's voice was tight. You want to tell me what's going on? Caleb glanced at Rebecca. She gave a tiny nod. He made a decision. Can we talk somewhere private? Tom led them to his office, a one-room building with a desk, 3 chairs, and bars on the single cell in the back where the 5 captured men sat watching them with sullen eyes. Tom closed the door, pulled the curtain over the window. Talk, he said. Caleb laid it out. The mine, the pattern of deaths, Crane's escalation. Rebecca filled in details, pulling information from her notes, names, dates, transactions that looked suspicious. By the time they finished, Tom was sitting at his desk with his head in his hands. This is bad, he said. This is really bad. Can you help? Rebecca asked. Help how? I'm a county sheriff. I got jurisdiction over exactly one piece of territory, and even that's questionable if federal claims are involved. You're talking about crossing territorial lines, investigating a company with more lawyers than I got bullets, going up against people who buy judges like you'd buy cattle. So that's a no. Tom looked up. I need to think about it, and you need to understand something. If I get involved in this, I'm putting a target on my back, on my family, on this whole town. Crane doesn't play nice. People are dying, Rebecca said. I know that. But jumping into a fight you can't win doesn't help anybody. It just makes more bodies. Caleb stood. Then we'll handle it ourselves. Caleb, No, you're right. This isn't your fight. I'm not asking you to risk your family for my problems. But I'm going to that Capitol, I'm going to find proof, and I'm going to stop these people, with or without a badge, backing me up. Tom studied him for a long moment. Then he sighed. You always were stubborn as hell. Learned from the best. A small smile tugged at Tom's face. Then it faded. If you're really doing this, you need to be smart. Crane's got eyes everywhere. You ride out of here on that stallion, half the territory's going to know within a day. So we go quiet, back roads, stay off the main routes. And you watch your back, because Can didn't strike me as the type who gives up easy. He's not. Tom walked to a cabinet, pulled out a map, spread it on the desk. All right, if you're going to the Capitol, here's what I'd recommend. He traced a route with his finger. North through the foothills, avoid the trading posts. There's an old mining road here that's mostly abandoned. It'll add half a day to your trip, but you won't run into anyone. What about supplies? There's a settlement here, Tom tapped the map, called Haven. Small place, maybe 40 people. They don't ask questions, don't care about territorial politics. You can resupply there. Rebecca was copying the route into her notebook. How do you know all this? Been sheriff for 23 years. You learned the territory. Tom rolled up the map, handed it to Caleb. Take this, and take this too. He pulled a badge from his drawer, pinned it to Caleb's coat. It's a deputy badge, not official, doesn't give you any real authority. But if someone asks, you can say you're working for me. Might buy you some breathing room. Caleb looked at the badge. It was tarnished, old, probably hadn't been used in a decade. But it was something. Thanks, Tom. Don't thank me yet. Just be careful, both of you. These people play for keeps. They left the office as the sun hit its peak. The street was busier now, people moving between shops, wagons rolling through, life going on like nothing was wrong. Caleb untied Juniper, checked the saddlebags. Rebecca appeared beside him, leading a bay mare. Meet Duchess. She's not much to look at, but she's got stamina. You always travel with a horse? I travel with everything I might need. Learned that the hard way. She swung into the saddle. So, tomorrow morning, where do we meet? My ranch, dawn. I'll be there. She rode off toward the boarding house. Caleb watched her go, then turned Juniper toward home. The ride back was quiet, his mind working through logistics, supplies, routes, timing, the things you had to think about when you were planning to cross territory held by people who wanted you dead. Halfway home, he realized he was being followed. It was subtle, a shape in the tree line, maybe a quarter-mile back, pacing him. Could have been another traveler, could have been a hunter, could have been someone watching to see where he went. Caleb didn't react, didn't change pace, just kept riding like he hadn't noticed. But his hand drifted to the revolver at his hip, and he started counting distances. Tree to tree, rock to rock, places to take cover if this went bad. The shape stayed with him for 3 miles. Then it veered off, disappeared into the forest. Could have been nothing. Probably wasn't. He made it back to the ranch as the sun started dropping, fed the horses, checked the perimeter, locked everything down tight. Inside, he laid out his gear. 2 revolvers, cleaned and loaded, rifle, ammunition, the old notebook, the map from Tom, a few days' worth of dried food, and at the bottom of the pile, wrapped in cloth, was the silver pocket watch. He picked it up, turned it over. The inscription on the back was worn but still readable. To Caleb, with all my heart. Emma had given it to him on their wedding day. He'd carried it for 8 years, right up until the moment she died. Then he'd put it away, couldn't bear to look at it. But now it felt like a reminder of what he'd had, what he'd lost, what he was fighting for. He slipped it into his pocket. That night, he didn't sleep, just sat at the window, watching the darkness, thinking about what came next. The capital was 3 days away, maybe 4 if they stayed off the main roads. That gave Crane time to move, time to prepare, time to set traps. Or it gave Caleb time to disappear. The problem with being a tracker was you learned to think like prey. You understood how animals moved, how they hid, how they survived when something bigger and meaner was hunting them. And right now, he was the prey. But prey could fight back. Around midnight, he heard it. Hoofbeats. Multiple riders, moving slow, quiet, coming from the north. Caleb stood, moved to the side of the window, looked out. 4 shapes in the darkness, spread wide, approaching the house. They stopped about 100 yards out, just shadows against the starlight, watching. He didn't move, didn't light a lamp, just stood there, letting them know he saw them. After 5 minutes, one of the riders raised a hand. The others turned, rode back the way they'd come. A message. "We know where you are. We're watching. Don't get comfortable." Caleb smiled in the darkness. Good. Let them watch. Let them think they had him pinned. Let them get confident, because in about 8 hours he was going to disappear. And when Crane finally figured out he was gone, he'd already be 3 steps ahead. That was the thing about being a hunter. You didn't always go for the direct approach. Sometimes you circled, waited, let your target think they were safe, and then you struck. Dawn came cold and clear. Caleb was already packed, horses ready, when he heard Rebecca approaching. She rode up just as the sun crested the ridge, looking tired but determined. "Couldn't sleep," she said. "Neither could I." Someone was watching the boarding house last night. Man in a dark coat standing across the street. He left around 2. They're keeping tabs. So how do we lose them? We don't. Not at first. Caleb swung into the saddle. We ride out normal, like we're just going to town. Let them follow, then we lose them in the canyon. You sure that'll work? No, but it's better than letting them track us the whole way. They rode out together, heading south toward town at an easy pace. Casual, unhurried. Behind them, Caleb caught glimpses of movement. 2 riders, maybe 3, staying back but definitely following. He let them. The canyon was a 15-mile ride. Narrow walls, twisting path, dozens of side branches and dead ends. Perfect place to disappear if you knew the terrain. Caleb knew the terrain. Halfway through, where the canyon branched into 3 separate paths, he turned to Rebecca. When I say run, you run. Don't look back. Don't wait for me. Just ride hard and follow the left fork. It'll take you to the old mining road. Wait for me there. What are you going to do? Make sure they don't follow. Before she could argue, he spurred Juniper into a gallop. The stallion surged forward, hooves thundering on stone. Behind them, the trailing riders responded, picking up speed. Caleb rode hard for 2 minutes, then yanked Juniper into a sharp right turn into one of the side branches. The canyon wall closed in, narrow enough his knees almost scraped rock. Behind him, he heard shouting. The riders were splitting up, trying to cover all the routes. Good. He pushed Juniper through the narrow passage, came out into a small box canyon. Dead end. The walls rose straight up, unclimbable. Perfect trap. Except Caleb wasn't trapped. He dismounted, led Juniper to the far wall where a crack in the rock, barely visible unless you knew to look, opened into a tight squeeze. He'd found it years ago, used it to move cattle when he didn't want to deal with the main canyon. He pushed through, Juniper following reluctantly, and emerged on the other side in a completely different branch of the canyon system. Behind him, He heard the riders reaching the box canyon, their confusion echoing off the walls. He didn't wait to hear more, just mounted and rode hard in the opposite direction, winding through passages he'd memorized years ago, until he finally emerged onto the old mining road where Rebecca sat waiting. "How did you—" she started. "Later, ride." They rode north for 6 hours, pushing hard, staying off the main routes like Tom had suggested. The landscape gradually changed, grassland giving way to foothills, foothills rising into mountains. By evening, they reached Haven. The settlement was smaller than Redemption, just a handful of buildings clustered around a natural spring. The people looked rough, weathered, the kind who'd come out here to get away from civilization and didn't appreciate visitors. But their money was good, and that was enough. They resupplied quickly, food, water, grain for the horses. The store owner didn't ask questions, barely even looked at them, just took the payment and went back to whatever he'd been doing. As they left, an old man sitting on a porch called out, "You two headed to the capital?" Caleb stopped. "Maybe. Might want to rethink that. Heard there's trouble on the roads. Bandits, folks say. But bandits don't usually travel in groups of 20. 20? Give or take. They came through here 2 days ago, heavily armed. Didn't stop, just passed through heading north. Could be nothing." The old man smiled without humor. "But usually ain't." Caleb and Rebecca exchanged looks. "Thanks for the warning," Caleb said. They rode out of Haven as the sun set, found a sheltered spot in the rocks to make camp. No fire, just cold food and quiet conversation. 20 men? Rebecca said. "That's a small army." "That's a message. Crane's not playing anymore." "So what do we do?" Caleb stared at the darkening sky. "We adapt, find another route, or we wait them out. We don't have time to wait. Then we go through them." She looked at him. "Through 20 armed men, the two of us." "I didn't say it was a good plan." Rebecca laughed, a short, sharp sound. "You're insane." "Probably." They sat in silence for a while. Then Rebecca spoke again, quieter. "Why are you doing this?" "Really? It's not just about the horse or the ranch. There's something else." Caleb was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was distant. 15 years ago, I was hunting a man named Jesse Carver. He'd killed 6 people, robbed twice that many. I tracked him for 3 months across 4 territories, finally cornered him in a town called Silver Creek. He paused, the memory sharp and painful. There was a gunfight. Carver had friends. It got messy. And when the smoke cleared, Emma was dead. Caught a stray bullet, wrong place, wrong time. My fault for bringing the fight to her. Rebecca didn't say anything, just listened. I buried that life, Caleb continued. Buried the guns, the tracking, all of it. Told myself I was done, that I'd lost my right to that kind of violence when it cost me her. He looked at Rebecca. But they came to my home, threatened the last thing I have of her, and I realized something. Running doesn't work, peace doesn't work, not when the other side won't let you have it. So you fight. So I fight. Not because I want to, because it's the only option left. They were quiet again. Above them, stars emerged one by one, brilliant in the clear mountain air. I'm sorry, Rebecca said finally. About your wife. Me too. Morning came too fast. They broke camp before dawn, rode north on roads that got progressively worse. By midday, they were in true wilderness, trees pressing close, the path barely visible. No signs of civilization anywhere. That's when they found the bodies. 3 men hanging from a tree. They'd been dead maybe a day, bodies already starting to stiffen. A sign nailed to the tree read, "Thieves." But Caleb recognized the faces. They were 3 of the 5 men he'd captured, the ones Sheriff Braddock had arrested. Rebecca went pale. How did they? Someone broke them out, brought them here, killed them. Caleb's voice was flat. A message for us. What kind of message? The kind that says they know we're coming and they're ready. They cut the bodies down in silence. It took 20 minutes, working together, Rebecca holding the rope while Caleb climbed. The men were heavy, awkward, their faces bloated and discolored. Caleb tried not to look at their expressions, the way their eyes had bulged, the marks on their necks where the rope had bitten deep. When the last body was on the ground, Rebecca stood back, wiping her hands on her coat. Her face was white. "We should bury them," she said. "No time." "Caleb." "I said no time." His voice came out harder than he meant. "We're exposed here, wide open. If whoever did this is watching, we're perfect targets standing around digging graves." She looked like she wanted to argue. Instead, she just nodded, climbed back on her horse. They rode in silence for another hour. Caleb kept checking behind them, scanning the tree line, looking for movement. His nerves were stretched tight as wire. The hanging men had changed something. This wasn't just about scaring them anymore. This was about sending a very specific message. We can reach anyone, even prisoners in a sheriff's custody, even men who thought they were safe. Around noon, Rebecca finally spoke. "Do you think Tom's all right?" Caleb had been wondering the same thing. Hard to say. If they broke those men out of his jail, he either fought back or he let it happen. "You don't really think he'd—" "No, but he's got a family. Someone puts a gun to your kid's head, you make choices you wouldn't otherwise make." Rebecca was quiet. Then, "We should go back. Make sure he's okay." "We go back, we lose 2 days, maybe more, and we walk right into whatever trap they're setting." "So we just leave him?" Caleb's jaw tightened. Tom knew what he was getting into when he helped us. He's a smart man. He'll handle it. "And if he can't? Then going back won't change anything except get us killed, too." It was brutal logic, the kind that left a sour taste in his mouth. But it was true. They were committed now. The only way forward was forward. They reached the foothills by evening. The terrain was getting rougher, the trail narrower, trees giving way to scrub brush and exposed rock. In the distance, mountains rose dark against the sky. The capital was on the other side, tucked into a valley that had made it rich from mining and trade. 2 more days of hard riding. Maybe 3 if they had to detour. They made camp in a shallow depression between 2 boulders, hidden from the trail. Caleb insisted on no fire again. Rebecca didn't argue this time. She pulled out her notebook, started writing by moonlight. Caleb watched her for a minute. "What are you doing?" "Taking notes. Everything we've seen, everywhere we've been. If something happens to us, at least there'll be a record." "Nothing's going to happen." "You don't know that." "I know I'm not planning on dying out here." She looked up at him. Plans change. They ate in silence. Dried meat, hard bread, water from their canteens. Not much, but enough. Caleb's mind was already moving ahead, thinking through scenarios. If Crane had 20 men on the road, they'd be watching the main routes. Checkpoints, probably. Maybe patrols. But you couldn't watch everywhere. Mountains had 1,000 hidden trails, game paths barely wide enough for a horse. Caleb had spent 15 years learning to think like something hunted. He could use that now. "Tomorrow we leave the road," he said. Rebecca looked up. "And go where?" "Higher, through the passes. It'll take longer, but we'll be harder to spot." "I'm not exactly a mountain climber." "You don't have to be. Just have to trust your horse and don't look down." She smiled, but it was thin. "That's not as reassuring as you think." They settled in for the night. Caleb took first watch, sitting with his back to the rocks, revolver in his lap. The night was cold, clear, every sound magnified in the silence. An owl hunting, wind through the brush, something small moving in the undergrowth. Around midnight he heard horses. He froze, listening. They were distant, maybe half a mile, moving slow along the trail. Multiple riders spread out, searching. He could hear voices occasionally, too faint to make out words. Patrol. Exactly like he'd thought. He watched them pass, counted at least 6 distinct shapes against the stars. They moved south, toward Haven, probably following the same route Caleb and Rebecca had taken, looking for fresh tracks. They'd find them. Question was how long before they connected those tracks back to this campsite. Caleb waited until the sounds faded completely. Then he woke Rebecca. "We're moving," he whispered. "What?" "It's the middle of the night. And there's a patrol on the road. We stay here. They'll find us by morning." She was awake instantly, all business. They packed quickly, quietly, working by moonlight. Caleb led them east, away from the trail, picking his way through rocks and brush by memory and instinct. The horses didn't like it. Too dark, too uncertain. But they trusted their riders enough to follow. By dawn, they were 5 miles from their original camp, tucked into a narrow canyon with walls that blocked them from view on 3 sides. Caleb finally let them stop. Rebecca slid off her horse, legs shaking. That was insane. That was necessary. I couldn't see anything. I was just following the sound of your horse. And you did fine. She sat down hard. I need to reconsider my career choices. Caleb allowed himself a small smile. Then he climbed one of the canyon walls, found a vantage point, and watched the valley behind them. After about an hour, he saw them. The patrol returning along the trail, moving faster now. They'd found the campsite, found the tracks leading east. But tracks in rocky ground were hard to follow, especially if you didn't know the terrain. The patrol stopped, milled around, then split up. 3 riders went north. 3 went south. None came east. Good enough. He climbed down, found Rebecca asleep against her saddle. He didn't wake her, just kept watch, let her rest. They had a long day ahead. When the sun was fully up, she stirred, looked around blearily. Did they find us? Not yet. That's comforting. They ate, then started climbing. The terrain was brutal, steep slopes, loose rock, narrow ledges barely wide enough for a horse. Caleb went first, testing each section before waving Rebecca forward. Twice they had to backtrack when paths ended in sheer drops. Once, Duchess lost her footing and nearly went over. Rebecca kept her calm, talked her back from the edge, hands shaking the whole time. By afternoon, they crested the first ridge. The view opened up, miles of wilderness stretching in every direction, mountains layered into the distance like waves on an ocean. Beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. How much farther? Rebecca asked. Caleb studied the terrain, matched it to the map in his head. Another day to the next valley. Then we descend, pick up the old mining road on the other side. And the capital? Day after that, if we don't run into trouble. When we run into trouble, you mean? That too. They descended the far side of the ridge, moving into a forest of pine and aspen. The air was thinner up here, colder. Caleb's breath came in clouds. His shoulder was aching from the climb, old injuries protesting the abuse. He was getting too old for this. 53 years old, most of them hard. His body remembered every fall, every fight, every night spent sleeping on cold ground. Emma used to joke that he'd creak like an old door by the time he was 60. He'd never make it to 60 at this rate. Around dusk, they found a stream. Fresh water, clear and cold. They refilled canteens, let the horses drink their fill. Rebecca splashed water on her face, neck. Can we risk a fire? She asked. Caleb looked around. They were deep in the trees, sheltered. Smoke would disperse through the canopy, and they were high enough that anyone searching would be looking lower, along the easier routes. Small one, he said, just enough to warm some food. They gathered wood, got a fire going. The heat was immediate and wonderful. Caleb felt his muscles unclenching for the first time in days. Rebecca heated water, made something that was technically coffee but tasted like mud. Sorry, she said. I'm not great at this. It's hot. That's enough. They sat close to the fire, sharing the warmth. Above them, stars were beginning to appear through the canopy. Tell me about her, Rebecca said suddenly. Caleb looked over. Who? Emma, your wife. You don't have to if you don't want, but I don't know. Seems like she should be remembered. He was quiet for a long time, remembering hurt, but Rebecca was right. Emma deserved to be remembered. She was stubborn, he said finally. Stubborn as hell. First time we met, she was breaking a horse nobody else could handle. Big black gelding, mean as a snake. She got thrown 4 times, got back on 5. Rebecca smiled. Sounds like she'd fit right into this situation. She would have hated this situation. Emma didn't like violence, didn't like guns or fighting or any of it. She tolerated what I did because she loved me, but she made me promise I'd walk away eventually. And you did. After she died, yeah. Seemed like the least I could do. Keep the promise even though she wasn't around to see it. You think she'd understand? What you're doing now? Caleb stared into the flames. I think she'd tell me I'm an idiot for getting into this mess. Then she'd probably help me get out of it. They were quiet for a while. The fire crackled. An owl called somewhere in the darkness. I was engaged once, Rebecca said. 3 years ago. Man named Thomas. Good man. Patient, kind, supportive of my work. What happened? I chose the job. There was a story, big corruption scandal in the railroad companies. I had to travel, be gone for months. Thomas said he understood, but he didn't. Not really. By the time I got back, he'd moved on. You regret it? Sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone in some hotel room in the middle of nowhere. But then I think about the stories I've broken, the people I've helped, the difference I've made. She shrugged. Maybe that's selfish, choosing work over love. Or maybe it's honest. She looked at him. You think? I think people make choices. Sometimes those choices cost them things. That doesn't make them wrong, just painful. Rebecca smiled. You're more philosophical than you look. I've had a lot of time to think. They let the fire die down as full darkness settled. Caleb took first watch again, though he suspected he wouldn't sleep much anyway. His mind was too active, running through scenarios, calculating risks. The problem was Crane Company knew they were coming. The hanged men proved that, which meant every step closer to the capital was a step into prepared ground. Ambush points. Traps. 20 men waiting for 2. The smart play would be to turn back. Regroup, find another angle. But Caleb had never been good at smart plays. Around 2 in the morning, he heard it again. Horses. Closer this time. And voices, clear enough to make out words. Can't have gone far, not in this terrain. Could have turned back. Kane says they're heading to the capital. We find them before they get there. And when we do, kill the man. Bring the woman. Boss wants to talk to her. Caleb's blood went cold. He moved silently to Rebecca, hand over her mouth to keep her from making noise as she woke. Her eyes went wide. He put a finger to his lips, pointed toward the voices. They were maybe 200 yards away, moving through the forest with lanterns. Stupid. The light destroyed their night vision, made them easy to track, but it also meant they weren't trying to hide. They thought they had the advantage. Caleb counted 4 distinct voices, maybe more staying quiet. He looked around their camp, small fire pit, 2 horses, supplies. Impossible to hide, impossible to move without making noise. So they didn't hide. Caleb grabbed his rifle, handed Rebecca his second revolver. You know how to use this? I'm a journalist, not a gunfighter. Point the end with the hole at what you want to stop. Pull the trigger. It's not complicated. That's the worst gun safety lecture I've ever heard. Yeah, well, we're short on time. He moved to the edge of their camp, found a position behind a fallen log. When they get close, I'll handle it. You stay low, stay quiet. If shooting starts, you run. Don't argue, just run. I'm not leaving you. Rebecca, I said I'm not leaving you. Her voice was hard. We're in this together. I'm not abandoning you to save my own skin. He wanted to argue. Wanted to tell her this wasn't her fight, that she had too much to lose. But the voices were getting closer, and there wasn't time. Fine. Stay behind the rocks. Don't shoot unless you have to. And for the love of everything, don't shoot me by accident. I'll try. The lanterns emerged from the trees. 4 men, like Caleb had counted. Maybe 5. One hanging back in the shadows. They moved into the clearing, guns drawn, confident. The leader, tall, scarred face, looked at the cold fire pit. Fresh, they were here. Where'd they go? Can't have gone far. Spread out. Check the... Caleb shot him in the leg. The man went down screaming. The lanterns dropped. Darkness flooded back in, chaos erupting. The other men were firing blind, muzzle flashes lighting the forest in strobes. Caleb rolled left, came up behind a different tree. Fired twice more. One shot hit something solid, wood or rock. The other found flesh. Someone yelled. Return fire shredded the tree he'd been behind 3 seconds ago. He moved again, circling, using the darkness. This was his element. He'd hunted at night for 15 years, learned to see without light, move without sound. These men were stumbling around half blind. Another shot. This one from Rebecca's position. Wide, high, hitting nothing, but it made the men duck, gave Caleb time to relocate. He came up behind the 4th man, struck him across the back of the head with the rifle butt. The man dropped. Caleb took his gun, threw it into the brush. 3 left. No, 2. One was down from the leg shot, crawling away. The last 2 were smart enough to go back to back, covering each other. Caleb couldn't get a clean angle without exposing himself. Stalemate. Then Rebecca fired again. This time she hit one of them. Shoulder, not fatal. But he spun, distracted, and that was enough. Caleb put 2 rounds center mass. The man fell. The last one ran. Caleb let him go. Chasing in the dark was how you got ambushed. Silence settled back over the forest, broken only by the groaning of wounded men and the ringing in Caleb's ears. Rebecca? I'm okay. I'm okay. Stay there. He moved through the clearing, checking bodies. 2 dead. 1 unconscious, 1 crawling away with a leg wound. The runner was long gone. He should have felt something. Guilt, maybe. Or satisfaction. But there was just numbness. This was what he'd been 15 years ago, what he'd tried to leave behind. It didn't feel like progress. It felt like regression. Rebecca emerged from behind the rocks, still holding the revolver. Her hands were shaking. I shot someone. You did what you had to. I shot someone. Her voice was higher now, shock setting in. I've been in dangerous situations, but I never actually... Caleb took the gun from her gently. Breathe. Just breathe. She did, ragged gasps that gradually steadied. When she looked at him again, her eyes were clear. What do we do now? Now we move. One of them got away. He'll bring others. Can we even move? It's the middle of the night. We don't have a choice. They packed in frantic silence, loading everything onto tired horses that didn't understand why they couldn't just sleep. Caleb kept listening for sounds of more riders, but the forest stayed quiet. For now. They moved north, pushing through darkness, trusting the horses to find footing. It was dangerous, reckless. But staying was worse. By dawn, they'd covered maybe 5 miles. Not enough. Not nearly enough. They stopped in a rocky clearing, both of them exhausted. The horses were lathered, breathing hard. Caleb's hands ached from gripping the reins. We can't keep this up, Rebecca said. I know. They're going to catch us eventually. We're running out of places to run. She was right. Crane had more men, more resources, more everything. They could keep sending patrols until sheer numbers won out, unless Caleb changed the game. We need to stop running, he said. What? We need to stop running and start hunting. Rebecca stared at him. You want to go after them? Caleb, there's 20 of them, and 2 of us. Not all at once, 1 at a time. Pick them off, make them scared. That's insane. Maybe. But right now they think we're prey. They're hunting us and they're confident. We flip that, make them the ones looking over their shoulders. Everything changes. Or we die. That's already on the table. She was quiet, thinking. Then slowly she nodded. What's the plan? Caleb pulled out Tom's map, studied it. They were close to the old mining road now, maybe 10 miles. The road connected to the main route about 15 miles from the capital. If Crane had men watching, that junction would be heavily guarded. But heavily guarded meant concentrated, predictable. We hit them at the junction, he said. Tonight, fast and hard. Then we disappear before they know what happened. Hit them how? However we can. He looked at her. You still have that notebook, all your research on Crane? Yeah, why? Because we're going to use it. Figure out who's important, who's expendable. Make them understand that they're not untouchable. Rebecca's expression shifted. She understood what he was saying. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about sending a message. All right, she said. Let's do it. They spent the day planning. Rebecca went through her notes, identified key figures in Crane's operation. Caleb scouted the area, memorizing terrain, finding approach routes and escape paths. The junction was exactly where Tom's map said it would be. A wide clearing where the mining road met the main route, with a small way station that looked abandoned but probably wasn't. Caleb counted 6 men visible, maybe more inside the building, 6 he could work with. As the sun set, they got ready. Caleb checked his guns, his ammunition. Rebecca looked pale but determined. You don't have to do this, he said. Yes, I do. This is my story too now. This stops being a story the second someone dies. I know. She met his eyes. I'm ready. They moved in as full darkness fell. Caleb went first, circling wide, getting into position. Rebecca waited at the tree line with the horses, ready to move when he gave the signal. The men at the junction were relaxed, complacent. They had a fire going, were passing a bottle around. One was asleep against the way station wall. Caleb picked his targets. The watchful ones first. The dangerous ones. He settled his breathing, found his center, and squeezed the trigger. The first shot dropped the man on watch. The second hit the bottle, spraying glass and whiskey. The third took another man in the shoulder before anyone even knew where the shots were coming from. Chaos. Beautiful, complete chaos. Men dove for cover, returned fire at shadows. Caleb was already moving, relocating, firing from a new position. He didn't aim to kill now, just to wound, to panic, to make them think there was an army out there instead of one man. He emptied both revolvers, switched to the rifle, kept moving, kept shooting. One of the men broke, ran for his horse, then another, then two more. Within 5 minutes, the junction was empty except for wounded men and abandoned supplies. Caleb emerged from cover, walked to the way station. Inside he found maps, supply lists, schedules. He grabbed everything that looked important, stuffed it into a bag. On the wall, someone had pinned a wanted notice. His own face stared back at him, 15 years younger. The text read, Caleb Vance, wanted for questioning. Approach with caution. He ripped it down, crumpled it. Rebecca appeared at the door, breathing hard. Is it done? It's done. Let's go. They rode hard through the night, putting distance between them and the junction. Behind them, somewhere in the dark, those men would be regrouping, sending word, preparing. Let them. Because Caleb Vance wasn't running anymore. He was hunting. By the time they reached the outskirts of the territorial capital, the sun was climbing toward noon, and Caleb's eyes felt like someone had rubbed sand in them. They'd ridden through the night, only stopping twice to rest the horses, and once when Rebecca nearly fell asleep in the saddle. Now the city sprawled below them, a collection of buildings that had grown too fast around the original mining settlement, all crooked streets and mismatched architecture. We need sleep, Rebecca said. Her voice was hoarse. We need information first. Caleb, we've been awake for 30 hours. I can barely think straight. Then don't think. Just follow my lead. She looked like she wanted to argue but didn't have the energy. They rode down into the valley, keeping to the smaller roads, avoiding the main thoroughfare where too many eyes would notice them. Caleb had been here once before, years ago, tracking a counterfeiter. The city had doubled in size since then, but the bones were the same. They found a boarding house on the eastern edge, the kind of place that didn't ask questions if your money was good. The woman running it, thick-armed, gray-haired, suspicious eyes, looked them over like she was pricing livestock. 2 rooms, Caleb said. $3 each, in advance. He paid. She handed over keys without another word. The room was small, barely big enough for a bed and a washstand. Caleb dropped his saddlebag, sat on the edge of the mattress. His body was screaming at him to lie down, but his mind was still racing, running through everything they'd taken from the junction. The documents were spread on the bed now, supply manifests, payroll records, shipping schedules, and buried in the middle, a letter on expensive paper with an official seal. He read it 3 times before the implications sank in. Someone knocked. Rebecca, looking as tired as he felt. Did you find something? Yeah. He handed her the letter. Read this. Her eyes scanned the page, then stopped. This is from the territorial governor. Keep reading. He's authorizing Crane Company to conduct mineral surveys on disputed land, giving them provisional mining rights. She looked up. This is dated 2 weeks ago, before they even came after you. It's not about the mine, Caleb said. The mine's just the excuse. Look at the section at the bottom. She read further. Her face went pale. They're planning to establish a private security force, armed guards, legal authority to remove squatters and enforce property claims. A private army, Caleb said. With the governor's blessing, they get control of that canyon. They don't just get the minerals. They get a choke point. Everything moving north has to go through there. Cattle, lumber, trade goods. They'd control the entire region. And anyone who won't sell becomes a squatter on what they'll claim is disputed land, which they can legally remove with armed force. Rebecca sat down hard on the room's only chair. That's not a business plan. That's a takeover. That's what I said. This is bigger than horses or ranches. They're building an empire. So what do? Caleb picked up another document. This one a ledger showing payments, names he didn't recognize next to amounts that made his teeth hurt. We prove it. Show everyone what they're doing. Make it so big they can't hide it. The governor signed off on this. If he's in their pocket, then we go over his head. Federal marshals, territorial oversight committee, someone who can't be bought. He looked at her. That's where you come in. You're the journalist. You know how to make noise. She was already pulling out her notebook, making lists. I'll need to verify sources. Cross-reference these payments with public records. Interview people who've dealt with Crane. Build a case that's airtight. How long? To do it right? A week, maybe 2. We don't have 2 weeks. Then I'll do it wrong, and it won't hold up in court. Caleb rubbed his face. She was right, but time was the enemy. Every hour they spent here was an hour Crane had to move against them, to silence witnesses, to destroy evidence, to make them disappear. 3 days, he said. You get 3 days to build your case. After that, we go public whether it's ready or not. That's not enough time. It's what we've got. She started to protest, then saw his expression and stopped. Instead, she stood, gathering her things. I'll start now. There's a records office downtown. Should be open until 6. You need sleep. I'll sleep when we're not being hunted. She paused at the door. What about you? I'm going to find out who else is involved. These payments don't just go to officials. There are businessmen, traders, even some names I recognize as law enforcement. Someone in this city knows more than what's written down. Be careful. You too. She left. Caleb waited 5 minutes, then followed. He'd lied about needing to investigate the names. What he really needed was to make sure Rebecca wasn't followed. She was smart, capable, but she wasn't trained for this. She wouldn't notice the man in the brown coat across the street who'd been there when they arrived. Wouldn't catch the way the stable hand watched which direction they went. Caleb noticed. He followed Rebecca from a distance, watching her back trail. Sure enough, brown coat fell in behind her, staying a block back. Professional work. Not close enough to spook her, but close enough to keep tabs. Caleb let it play out for 3 blocks. Then he took a parallel street, moved fast, and came up behind the tail from a side alley. The man never saw it coming. Caleb grabbed him by the collar, dragged him into the alley, and slammed him against the wall. Who are you working for? The man's hand went for a gun. Caleb caught his wrist, twisted hard. Bones ground together. The gun clattered to the ground. I asked you a question. Go to hell. Caleb increased the pressure on his wrist. The man's face went white. You're either going to talk to me or to the federal marshals. Your choice. But if you make me drag you to their office, I guarantee they'll be less friendly. You're bluffing. You can't go to the marshals. You're wanted yourself. Wanted for questioning, not the same as wanted for crimes. And I've got enough evidence in my room to make them real interested in Crane Company. So unless you want to be the first one they interrogate about murder and conspiracy, you better start talking. The man's eyes darted, looking for escape. Finding none. All right. I'm just supposed to watch you, report where you go, who you talk to. Who pays you? I don't know names. I get my orders from a man at the Golden Eagle Saloon. Big guy, scar on his neck. He pays cash, no questions. Caleb knew the type. Middlemen, buffers between the people giving orders and the people following them. How many others are watching us? I don't know. I just do my job. Your job was following a woman to the records office. The man had the decency to look ashamed. It's just work, all right? I got debts. They pay good. Caleb let him go. The man stumbled, caught himself. You tell your boss I'm not hiding. You tell him if he wants to know where I am, all he has to do is ask. But if I catch anyone following Miss Marsh again, I won't be this polite. That's it? You're letting me go? I'm giving you a message to deliver. Whether you're smart enough to deliver it is your problem. The man grabbed his gun from the ground and ran. Caleb watched him disappear, then continued following Rebecca's route. She'd made it to the records office without incident, was already inside talking to a clerk. He found a cafe across the street with a view of the door and ordered coffee. The waitress looked at him like he was 3 days dead, which wasn't far from accurate. He probably smelled worse than he looked. While he waited, he studied the street, looking for patterns, familiar faces. Anyone else watching the records office? There, a woman in a green dress, pretending to window shop but spending too much time in front of a store that was clearly closed. And there, a young man reading a newspaper he hadn't turned a page of in 10 minutes. So Brown Coat hadn't been alone. Crane had multiple people watching, which meant they'd known exactly where Caleb and Rebecca would go. That letter hadn't been abandoned by accident. The junction hadn't been lightly guarded by coincidence. They'd been herded here. The realization hit like cold water. Every move they'd made, every decision, it had all been pushed, guided. The hanged men were meant to scare them toward the capital. The patrols were meant to make them take the mountain route. The junction was supposed to give them confidence, make them think they'd won something. And now they were in the capital, exactly where Crane wanted them, surrounded by watchers, walking into whatever trap had been prepared. Caleb stood, left money on the table, and walked directly toward the woman in the green dress. She saw him coming, tried to move away casual-like. He caught up in 3 strides. "Tell Colin I want a meeting." She froze. I don't know what you're—" "Yes, you do. Tell him I'll be at the Territorial Hotel tonight at 8. He wants to talk. That's where I'll be. He wants to play games. I'll burn this whole thing down and take my chances with the marshals." "You're insane. That's been mentioned. 8 o'clock. Don't be late." He walked away before she could respond, heading back toward the boarding house. His heart was hammering, adrenaline cutting through the exhaustion. This was a risk, a big one. But fighting in the dark against an enemy he couldn't see wasn't working. Better to force them into the open, make them commit. The problem with traps was they worked both ways. Back at the boarding house, he cleaned up as best he could, changed shirts, checked his guns. The revolvers were getting low on ammunition. He'd need to resupply soon, and food, and sleep. Later. All of that later. At 6, Rebecca returned. She looked energized despite the exhaustion. "You're not going to believe what I found." "Try me." She spread papers across the bed. "These payments you found? I cross-referenced them with property records. Every single person on this list has sold land to Crane in the last 6 months, and every single sale was for below market value. They were forced. More than that. Look at the dates. Every sale happened within 3 days of someone in that person's family having an accident, a fall, a fire, a robbery. Something that made them vulnerable." Caleb studied the list. 15 names, 15 families terrorized into selling. "Torres was just the most recent," Rebecca continued. "They've been doing this systematically, creating problems, then offering solutions. And anyone who still refused—" She tapped another document. "Disappeared. 7 people in 6 months, all ruled as having left the territory voluntarily." "You're saying they killed 7 people. I'm saying 7 people vanished right after refusing to sell, and Crane bought their land from the territory for unpaid taxes." Her eyes were bright with anger. "This isn't business. This is organized crime with legal paperwork." "Can you prove it?" "I can prove the pattern. I can prove the sales were under duress. I can prove people vanished. But proof of murder? That's harder. I'd need bodies, witnesses, something concrete." "What about the governor's letter?" "That's gold. If I can confirm it's authentic, if I can show he knew what Crane was really doing, that's enough to trigger a federal investigation." Caleb looked at the spread of documents. It was good work, solid work, but it still wasn't enough to stop what was coming. "I set up a meeting," he said, "with Kane, tonight." Rebecca's head snapped up. "You did what?" "We're not going to solve this by hiding. We need to know what they're planning, what they know about us, and we need them to think they're winning." "That's insane." "Second time I've heard that today. Because it's true. Caleb, they want us dead. Walking into a meeting is suicide. Only if I go alone." He looked at her. "I need you to be somewhere else. Somewhere public. Writing your story, making noise. If something happens to me, you publish everything. Make sure people know. And if something happens to both of us, then we make sure it doesn't." She wanted to argue more. He could see it in her face. But she was smart enough to know arguing wouldn't change anything. "Where do you want me?" "There's a newspaper office on 3rd Street. The Territorial Voice, they're independent, not owned by anyone. You take all of this," he gestured at the documents, "and you start writing. Get it down on paper. Names, dates, everything. If I'm not back by midnight, you give it to the editor and tell him to run it." "That doesn't give you much time." "It's plenty." She gathered the documents, started packing them into her bag. At the door, she stopped. "Caleb, don't do anything stupid." "Wouldn't dream of it." She almost smiled. Then she was gone. Caleb finished preparing. 2 guns, fully loaded. A knife in his boot. The letter from the governor in his inside pocket. At 7:30, he walked to the Territorial Hotel, the finest establishment in the capital, all marble and crystal and money. The desk clerk looked at him like he'd tracked mud onto the carpet. "Can I help you?" "I'm meeting someone. Private dining room." "Name?" "Vance." The clerk's expression changed. Fear, maybe. Or recognition. "Of course. Right this way." He led Caleb through the main floor to a hallway in the back. A door opened into a room with a single table, 2 chairs, and no windows. Perfect place for a meeting. Or an execution. Caleb sat facing the door, back to the wall. Old habits. He checked his watch. 7:55. At exactly 8 o'clock, Kane walked in. He looked the same as before. Black duster, flat-brimmed hat, that face like carved stone. But his eyes were different, sharper, hungrier. "Mr. Vance," he said, "I admit I didn't expect you to reach out. Seems like we keep running into each other. Thought we should talk like civilized people." Kane smiled. It didn't touch his eyes. "Civilized? After you killed 4 of my men and wounded 6 others? After you tried to steal my horse and hang 3 prisoners? Ah, yes. That was unfortunate, but necessary. They failed. Failure has consequences. So does success, which is why we're here." Kane sat down across from him. Up close, Caleb could see the details. Old scars along his jawline, calluses on his hands from years of holding weapons, a slight bulge under his coat that meant at least 2 guns. "You're a hard man to kill," Kane said. "I respect that. Most people would have run by now, gone back to whatever quiet life they'd built. But not you. I tried quiet. Didn't take. So I've noticed." Kane leaned back. "Let me be direct. You're sitting on land my employer wants. You've embarrassed us repeatedly. You've cost us time, money, and manpower. Under normal circumstances, this is where I'd have you killed and be done with it. But these aren't normal circumstances. No. Because you're Caleb Vance, the Reaper, the man who brought in 37 outlaws and never lost a trail. You have a reputation, and reputation is valuable." Caleb's hand stayed near his gun. "Get to the point. The point is this. We don't want a war with you. Wars are expensive, messy, unpredictable. So I'm here to make you an offer." Kane pulled a paper from his coat, slid it across the table. "Sell us your land. We'll pay you 3 times market value. Enough to buy a new ranch somewhere far from here. Start over. Live quiet." Caleb looked at the paper. The number written there was staggering. More money than he'd see in 2 lifetimes. "And if I say no? Then we take the land anyway. We have the governor's authorization. We have the legal authority. We have enough lawyers to tie you up in court until you're dead from old age. And if you fight us, we'll make sure everyone you care about suffers for it. The journalist, the sheriff, everyone in redemption." "You'd burn a whole town? We'd prefer not to. But we will if we must." Kane's voice was calm, matter-of-fact. "This is happening, Mr. Vance, with or without you. The only question is whether you walk away rich or die poor." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up the paper, looked at it closer. "This is a good offer. I'm glad you think so. There's just one problem." "What's that?" "I don't trust you." Kane's smile faded. "Mr. Vance, you killed William Torres after he refused to sell. You've terrorized 15 families. You've murdered at least 7 people that we know of. So forgive me if I don't believe you'll just let me ride away into the sunset with a bag of money. We have no interest in killing you if you cooperate, but you have every interest if I don't." Caleb leaned forward. "See, I've been thinking about this, about why you really want my land. It's not just the mine. The mine's valuable, sure, but not valuable enough to justify all this. The governor's letter, the private army, the systematic takeover of the entire region, that's not about copper or silver. Then what is it about? Control. You're building a monopoly, and once you have it, you'll control everything. Trade routes, resource extraction, land prices. You'll be able to set the terms for an entire territory. That's worth more than any mine." Kane's expression was unreadable. "You're smarter than you look. It's been said. So here's my counteroffer. You leave. Now. Tonight. Take your men, take your plans, and go back to Denver or wherever you came from. Tell your employer the deal's off. The territory's not for sale." "And why would we do that?" Caleb pulled the governor's letter from his pocket. "Because if you don't, This goes to every newspaper between here and Washington, along with the payment records, the property transfers, all of it, and your whole operation collapses." Kane stared at the letter. Something flickered in his eyes. Not fear, calculation. "You're bluffing. If you had time to publish that, you'd have done it already. Maybe I wanted to give you a chance to walk away clean. Or maybe you're desperate, cornered, running out of options." Kane stood. "I'll make you a new offer. Give me those documents right now, and I'll make your death quick, painless. I'll even leave the journalist alive." "That's generous. It's more than you deserve." Caleb stood too. His hand was on his gun now. "Then I guess we're done talking." "I suppose we are." For a moment they just stood there, two men with weapons, calculating angles and distances and who would draw first. Then the door burst open. 3 men rushed in, guns drawn. Caleb's hand moved, but Kane was faster. A pistol appeared in his hand, aimed directly at Caleb's chest. "Don't," Kane said quietly. "You're fast, but not that fast." The 3 men spread out, covering exits. Professional positioning. Caleb recognized the setup. This wasn't a negotiation. It had never been a negotiation. It was a trap, and he'd walked right into it. "The documents," Kane said. "Now." Caleb's mind raced. 3 guns on him, maybe more outside. Rebecca was across town, hopefully safe. The documents in his pocket were the only leverage he had. If he gave them up, they'd kill him. If he didn't, they'd kill him anyway. So he made the only choice that made sense. He drew. The room exploded. Caleb fired twice, diving left. One of the 3 men went down. Return fire shredded the wall where he'd been standing. He hit the ground, rolled, came up behind an overturned table. More gunfire. Wood splinters. Someone screamed. Caleb fired blind, just creating chaos, buying seconds. His mind was working frantically. Doors blocked. No windows. Only way out is through them. Bad odds. Really bad odds. He popped up, fired again. Hit one of the men in the leg. The man fell, gun clattering away. 2 left plus Kane. Then the window shattered. Not glass breaking from inside, glass breaking from outside. Through the new opening came 3 things in rapid succession. A smoke canister, a flash of gunfire, and Rebecca's voice screaming, "Down!" Caleb dropped flat. The canister exploded, filling the room with thick gray smoke. More gunfire, but confused now. Everyone shooting at shadows. A hand grabbed his arm. Rebecca, appearing out of the smoke like a ghost. "Come on!" They ran toward the broken window. Behind them, Khan was shouting orders. Footsteps thundering. But the smoke was thick, disorienting. They climbed through the window into an alley. Rebecca had 2 horses waiting, already mounted and ready. They threw themselves into saddles and rode. Behind them, men poured out of the hotel. Guns fired. Bullets sparked off cobblestones. But Rebecca and Caleb were already turning a corner, disappearing into the maze of city streets. They rode hard for 10 minutes, taking random turns, doubling back, losing any pursuit. Finally, in a quiet warehouse district, they stopped. Caleb looked at Rebecca. She was covered in soot, breathing hard, holding a pistol like she actually knew how to use it now. "I thought I told you to stay at the newspaper," he said. "I did, for about 20 minutes. Then I realized you were walking into a trap and decided not to let you die alone." "How did you know?" "Because I'm a journalist. I ask questions. I talked to the hotel staff, found out Khan had reserved that room 3 days ago, before you even arrived in the capital, before you could have set up any meeting." She glared at him. "It was a setup from the start. They wanted you there. And you came anyway." "Of course I came anyway. Someone has to keep you alive." Despite everything, Caleb smiled. "Where'd you learn to throw smoke canisters through windows?" "I didn't. I asked the newspaper editor where I could buy explosives on short notice. He gave me a very strange look and directed me to a mining supply shop." "You're full of surprises." "I'm full of rage and poor decision-making. There's a difference." She looked back the way they'd come. "They're going to come after us now, with everything." "I know. So what do we do?" Caleb thought about it. They had the documents still. They had proof. But they were trapped in a city controlled by Crane, hunted by professionals, running out of places to hide. The smart play would be to run, get out of the capital, regroup, try again later. But Caleb was tired of running. "We finish it," he said. "Tonight. We take everything we have, every piece of evidence, and we make so much noise they can't silence it. How? The same way you win any war. You don't fight their army, you turn their allies against them. Understanding dawned in Rebecca's eyes. The people on the payment list, the ones Crane bought off. If we can get them to turn, they'll tear the whole thing apart from the inside. That's insane. I'm getting used to that. She laughed, sharp and wild. All right, let's burn it all down. They rode through the dark city, and somewhere behind them, Kane was organizing a hunt. 20 men, maybe more, professional killers with one job. But Caleb had spent 15 years learning how to make dangerous men destroy themselves. And he was about to give Crane Company a lesson they'd never forget. The first man they visited was a banker named Howard Sims. He lived in a decent house on the west side of the capital, the kind of place that spoke of comfort without ostentation. Caleb and Rebecca arrived just after 10, when the streets were mostly empty and the risk of witnesses was low. Caleb knocked. Hard enough to be heard, not hard enough to alarm. After a moment, footsteps. A voice through the door. Who is it? Someone who knows about the $20,000 you took from Crane Company 3 months ago. Silence. Then locks turning. The door opened a crack, revealing a man in his 50s with thinning hair and frightened eyes. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Caleb held up the payment ledger, angled so Sims could see his name. You approved a fraudulent land transfer, signed off on property seizures you knew were illegal, all for money, and now Crane owns you. Sims tried to close the door. Caleb's boot stopped it. We're not here to threaten you, Rebecca said, stepping into view. We're here to offer you a way out. There is no way out. You don't understand what these people are capable of. Actually, we do. That's why we're here. She pulled out her notebook. Tell us everything. Every transaction, every order, every dirty deal. We publish it, Crane goes down, and you get to testify as a witness instead of being prosecuted as an accomplice. They'll kill me. They'll kill you anyway, Caleb said. The moment you're not useful, you're a liability. You think men like Kane leave witnesses? Sims's face went paler. He knew. Of course he knew. What do you want? He asked finally. Names, connections, who else is involved, and documentation. Every paper trail that connects Crane to illegal activity. That's suicide. No, Rebecca said. That's survival. You help us. You get immunity. You stay quiet. You go down with them. Sims looked between them, making calculations, weighing his options. I need guarantees, he said. We can't guarantee anything except this. If you help us, you have a chance. If you don't, you're already dead. You just don't know it yet. It took another 10 minutes of convincing, but eventually Sims let them in, led them to a study, and opened a safe that held copies of every illegal transaction he'd ever approved. Documents Crane thought had been destroyed, evidence that mapped out the entire conspiracy. There are others, Sims said as he handed over the papers. At least 6 more officials, maybe 8, all taking money, all scared. Give us their names. He did. And with each name, the web grew clearer. The territorial judge who'd ruled in Crane's favor on disputed claims. The land office clerk who'd falsified records. The marshal who'd looked the other way when people disappeared. It was a system, carefully constructed. Everyone implicated, everyone dependent on everyone else's silence. Which meant if one piece fell, the whole thing would collapse. They left Sims's house at 11 with twice as much evidence as they'd arrived with. The banker stood in his doorway, looking like a man who'd just signed his own death warrant and couldn't decide if he felt better or worse. He'll run, Rebecca said as they rode away. Probably, but not before he warns the others. Fear spreads fast. They hit 3 more houses that night. A territorial assessor who'd undervalued seized properties, a shipping clerk who'd falsified manifests, a former deputy who'd helped fabricate evidence against ranchers who wouldn't sell. Each one followed the same pattern: denial, fear, calculation, then cooperation, because the alternative was worse. By 3 in the morning, they had enough evidence to fill 2 saddlebags. Payment records, forged documents, testimonies implicating everyone from local officials to the governor himself. It was devastating, comprehensive, undeniable, and it made them targets worth killing at any cost. They returned to the newspaper office as dawn was breaking. The editor, a thin man named Marcus Webb, who looked like he survived on coffee and spite, was already there, reading through the first batch of documents they'd dropped off. "This is incredible," he said without looking up. "This is Pulitzer-level work. If even half of it's true." "All of it's true," Rebecca said. "I verified everything, multiple sources, cross-referenced. It's airtight." Webb finally looked at her. "You understand what happens when I publish this? Crane Company will come after me. After this paper, they have lawyers, money, influence. They have a conspiracy that's about to be exposed," Caleb said. "Lawyers can't fix that." "You'd be surprised what lawyers can fix." But Webb was smiling. "Still, this is the story. The one you wait your whole career for. I'd be a coward not to run it." "How fast can you print?" Rebecca asked. "Special edition? I can have copies on the street by noon, but that's cutting it close. I'll need to verify some of these sources, fact-check the financial records." "No time for that. Print it now. Everything. Flood the city before Crane knows what hit them." Webb hesitated. Then he nodded. "All right, but you two need to disappear. The moment this hits the street, you're going to have every gun in the territory looking for you." "We're already at that point," Caleb said. "Then you're about to reach a new level of hunted." Webb gathered the documents. "There's a safe house, old print shop on the east side. Nobody knows about it except the people who work here. You can hide there until things settle." "We're not hiding." "Caleb," Rebecca started. "No, we started this. We finish it. When that paper hits the street, we're in the main square. Visible. Public. Let Crane try to make us disappear then." Webb looked at Rebecca. She shrugged. "He's stubborn. I've learned not to argue. You're both insane." "We've heard that too." They left the newspaper office with the sun rising behind them, painting the Capitol in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere in the city, Kane was organizing his hunt. 20 men, maybe more. Professional killers with orders to eliminate the problem. But Caleb wasn't thinking about Kane. He was thinking about the other players. The judge. The marshal. The governor. All those people who'd built their fortunes on Crane's corruption. When the paper hit the street, they'd have choices to make. Save themselves or protect Crane. And people were always more interested in saving themselves. They spent the morning preparing, bought ammunition, found defensive positions in the main square, buildings with good sight lines, multiple exits. Caleb positioned Rebecca in a shop with a clear view and a back door that led to 3 different streets. "If shooting starts, you run," he told her. "We've been over this." "I'm serious, Rebecca. You've done your job. The story's out there. You don't need to die for it." "Neither do you. I'm not planning on it. But if it comes to that, one death is better than 2. She grabbed his arm. "Listen to me. I've been alone for 3 years, chasing stories, living out of hotel rooms, telling myself the work was enough. And maybe it was. But these last few days, riding with you, fighting beside you, I remembered what it feels like to not be alone. So don't you dare tell me to run. We're in this together." Caleb looked at her, really looked, saw the determination in her eyes, the set of her jaw. She meant it. "All right," he said. "Together." The newspapers hit the street at noon exactly. Caleb watched from his position in a second-floor window as newsboys spread out across the square, shouting headlines. People stopped, bought copies, started reading. The effect was immediate and electric. Conversations erupted, people pointing at pages, names being read aloud. Within 15 minutes, a crowd had gathered outside the territorial courthouse, demanding answers. Within 30 minutes, the marshal appeared with 6 deputies trying to disperse the crowd. Within 45 minutes, someone threw a rock through the courthouse window. The city was coming apart. Caleb kept watching, looking for patterns, for movement that didn't fit. And there, a group of men moving through the crowd, not panicked, not curious, moving with purpose. Crane's men. He counted 8, no, 10, spreading out, surrounding the square. A figure emerged from the crowd. Kane, dressed in the same black duster, face calm despite the chaos erupting around him. He looked directly at Caleb's window. Couldn't possibly see him in the shadows, but somehow knew he was there. Then Kane smiled and pulled out a gun. The shot echoed across the square. People screamed, scattered. Kane fired again, deliberately into the air. Not trying to hit anyone, just creating panic. The 10 men drew their weapons. The crowd became a stampede. And in the chaos, Kane and his men moved toward Caleb's building. Caleb descended the stairs two at a time. This was it, the final confrontation. He'd known it would come to this, known since the moment he'd drawn on them in the hotel. Sometimes violence was the only language people understood. He hit the ground floor, moved to the front door. Across the square, he could see Rebecca leaving her position, circling around. Good. She'd have a better angle from there. The door burst open. Two of Khan's men rushed in. Caleb shot the first one in the shoulder, dropping him. The second got off one shot, wild, high, before Caleb's bullet hit him in the leg. Both men went down, but that left 8 more. And Kane. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Caleb dove behind a counter as bullets shredded the wall above him. He fired back blind, just keeping them honest, buying time to think. The problem was numbers. He couldn't fight 8 men in an open street, needed to even the odds somehow. Then he heard it. Different gunfire, coming from the second floor. Rebecca had circled back, gotten inside, was firing down at Kane's men from above. 3 of them broke off to deal with her. That left 5. Better odds. Caleb burst from cover, firing as he ran. Hit one man's center mass, wounded another. Made it to the side door and out into an alley. Behind him, footsteps. 3 men following. He let them come, led them deeper into the alley, away from witnesses, away from the square. At the end was a dead end. Brick wall, no exits. The 3 men appeared at the alley entrance, spreading out. They had him trapped, except Caleb had been here before. Yesterday, scouting routes. He knew this alley had a side door hidden behind stacked crates. He fired twice, dropped behind the crates, and went through the door in one smooth motion. It led into a warehouse, full of shadows and storage, with a dozen ways out. The 3 men followed. He could hear them calling to each other, trying to coordinate. He picked them off one at a time. First man got too confident, stepped into the open. Caleb shot him from behind a stack of grain sacks. The second one panicked, fired at shadows. Caleb circled behind him, took him down with a blow to the head. The third one was smarter, stayed quiet, stayed hidden, waiting for Caleb to make a mistake. So Caleb made noise, deliberately kicked over a crate. The man turned toward the sound, gun raised, and Caleb stepped out from a completely different direction and put a bullet in his arm. 3 down, 5 to go. He returned to the square. The chaos had intensified. The crowd had turned into a mob. People were demanding answers from officials who were nowhere to be found. The courthouse doors had been barricaded from inside. And in the middle of it all, Kane stood calm, directing his remaining men with hand signals. When he saw Caleb emerge from the alley, his expression didn't change, just nodded, like he'd expected it. Then he drew both his guns. Caleb did the same. For a moment, the world narrowed to just the 2 of them. The square, the mob, the chaos, all of it faded. Just 2 men who'd been heading toward this moment since the first bullet hit Caleb's barn door. They fired simultaneously. Caleb's shot took Kane in the shoulder. Kane's bullet grazed Caleb's ribs, burning like fire. Both men staggered. Both stayed up. Khan fired again. Caleb dropped, rolled, came up shooting. One of Kane's remaining men went down. Another took cover behind a wagon. Rebecca appeared on a rooftop, firing down. Her shot hit one of Kane's men in the leg. He collapsed, screaming. That left 2 plus Kane. Kane was bleeding from the shoulder, but didn't seem to notice. He advanced on Caleb, firing methodically. Caleb returned fire, backing up, looking for cover. His gun clicked empty. So did Kane's. They both dropped their pistols. Kane pulled a knife. Caleb did the same. "You're persistent," Kane said. Blood was running down his arm. "I'll give you that. You're not the first person to try to kill me. I will be the last." They came together in a rush. Knife work was ugly, brutal, nothing like the clean gunfights. It was grappling and slashing and trying to find the artery before the other person found yours. Caleb was older, slower, but he'd spent 15 years learning to fight dirty. He went for Kane's wounded shoulder, pressed hard. Kane's face went white. His knife hand wavered. Caleb drove his own knife up under Kane's ribs, not deep, not fatal, but enough. Kyan stumbled back, hand pressed to his side. His remaining 2 men moved to help him. Rebecca fired again, driving them back. And then suddenly, it was over. Federal marshals poured into the square, a dozen of them, badges visible, guns drawn. They'd been summoned by the newspaper story, arrived just as the shooting peaked. Kane looked at them. looked at Caleb, made a calculation, and ran. His 2 remaining men followed. The marshals gave chase, but Kane knew the city better. He disappeared into the maze of streets, leaving a trail of blood. One of the marshals approached Caleb. "You Vance?" "Yeah." "You're under arrest." "For what?" "We'll figure that out. Right now, you're coming with us until we sort out this mess." He looked around at the bodies, the chaos, the mob. "What the hell happened here?" "Revolution," Rebecca said, appearing at Caleb's side. "You're looking at the end of Crane Company's control over this territory." The marshal looked skeptical, but he saw the newspapers scattered across the square, the crowd surrounding the courthouse, the fear in the faces of officials watching from windows. "All right, us," he said. "Let's start from the beginning." It took 3 days to sort out. The marshals arrested everyone on Rebecca's list. The banker, the judge, the land clerk, the marshal who'd been taking bribes. They brought in federal prosecutors, started building cases. The governor tried to claim ignorance. That lasted until they showed him his own signature on the authorization letter. He resigned within an hour. Maxwell Crane himself appeared on the second day, surrounded by lawyers, denying everything. But the evidence was overwhelming. The paper trail was complete. And once one official started talking, trying to cut deals, the others followed. By the third day, Crane Company was finished. Assets frozen, leadership arrested. The entire operation dismantled piece by piece. Kane was never found. Some said he fled to Mexico. Others claimed he died from his wound in some back alley. Caleb didn't care which, as long as he was gone. They released Caleb on the 4th day. No charges. Self-defense, the marshals ruled. Defense of property. Everything he'd done was legal, if barely. Rebecca's story ran in 17 newspapers across 3 territories. She became famous overnight. Offers poured in from bigger papers, prestigious positions in eastern cities. Caleb found her at the newspaper office, packing her notes. "So, you're leaving," he said. "That's the job. Follow the story." "What's the next story?" "Railroad corruption in Chicago. Could take months." They were quiet for a moment. "I could come with you," Caleb said. "Help, like I did here." Rebecca smiled. "You hate cities. You'd be miserable in Chicago." "Probably. And you have a ranch, horses, a life you built with someone you loved. You should go back to that. It's quieter without you there." "Quiet's what you wanted, remember?" He didn't argue. She was right, about all of it. She crossed to him, kissed him on the cheek. "Thank you for everything, for being stubborn and crazy and not giving up when any sane person would have." "Back at you. If you ever need help, or just someone to talk to, send a telegram. I'll come." "I know." She gathered her things, walked to the door, stopped. "Caleb, she'd be proud of you. Emma, what you did here." "I killed people." "You saved more. You stopped something evil. That matters." He wanted to believe that. Wanted to think the violence had a point beyond just more violence. Maybe it did. Maybe stopping corruption, protecting the vulnerable, standing up to bullies who thought money and guns made them invincible. Maybe that was worth the cost. Or maybe he was just telling himself that to sleep at night. Rebecca left. Caleb stood in the empty office, surrounded by papers documenting everything they'd uncovered, and felt the weight of it all settle on his shoulders. The ride back to the valley took 5 days. He went slow, giving Juniper time to rest, giving himself time to think. The territory looked different now, cleaner somehow, like a fever had broken. Towns he passed through were celebrating. The territorial legislature had already started passing reforms. New oversight committees, tighter regulations on land transfers. People were hopeful. Caleb wasn't sure he believed in hope, but he didn't disbelieve in it either. He reached his ranch on a Tuesday afternoon. The place looked exactly like he'd left it. Barn still standing, house still intact, like nothing had changed. Except everything had changed. Sheriff Braddock was waiting on the porch. He stood when Caleb rode up, looking relieved. "Thought you might not come back," Tom said. "Thought about it. But here you are." "Here I am." Tom helped him unsaddle Juniper, get the horse settled in the barn. The other horses were healthy, well-fed. Tom had been taking care of them. "Those men who broke into my jail," Tom said. "Federal marshals caught them 2 days ago. Turns out Crane had them on payroll. They're all talking now, trying to cut deals." "Good. And the town council voted. We're setting up a cooperative. All the ranchers pooling resources, watching out for each other. No more single targets. That's smart. Tom looked at him. You okay? I don't know. Ask me in a year. Fair enough. They walked back to the house. Inside, everything was dusty but intact. Caleb put coffee on, and they sat at the kitchen table like they'd done 100 times before. You did good, Tom said. What you did in the Capitol. People are talking about it. You're a hero. I'm not a hero. Heroes don't have body counts. Heroes do what needs doing, even when it's hard, even when it costs them. Caleb thought about that, about the men he'd killed, the people he'd hurt, the violence he'd thought he'd left behind. But he also thought about the families who still had their homes, the ranchers who wouldn't be terrorized, the system that had been corrupt and was now being cleaned out. Maybe Tom was right. Maybe it had mattered. Or maybe he was just an old killer who'd found one last good excuse. I'm tired, Tom. I know. I'm tired of fighting, tired of guns, tired of looking over my shoulder. Then stop. That easy? No, but possible. You stopped before. You can stop again. Last time I stopped, Emma died. Tom was quiet. Then, she didn't die because you stopped. She died because the world's a dangerous place. You can't control that. Can't protect everyone. All you can do is decide who you want to be. Caleb looked out the window, at the valley, at the mountains beyond, at the life he'd built and nearly lost and somehow still had. I want to be someone who sleeps at night, he said finally. Someone who doesn't reach for a gun every time a door opens. Someone who can look at a horse and just see a horse, not a reason for war. Then be that. How? Tom smiled. One day at a time. Same way anyone does it. They finished their coffee in comfortable silence. Then Tom left, promising to check in next week, and Caleb was alone with his thoughts and his memories and his choices. He walked to the barn one more time. Juniper was calm, content, completely unbothered by everything that had happened. Animals didn't carry grudges, didn't dwell on violence. They just lived. Caleb envied that. He reached into his pocket, pulled out Emma's watch. Still stopped at 11:43. He'd kept it close through everything, a reminder of what he'd lost, what he was fighting for. But maybe it was time to let go. Not forget. Never forget. But let go of the weight, the guilt, the feeling that he owed the past more than the present. He wound the watch. The mechanism caught, resisted. Then, slowly, reluctantly, it started ticking again. A small thing. Meaningless, maybe. But it felt like something. He walked back to the house as the sun set, painting the valley in gold and red. Tomorrow he'd fix the fence that needed mending, check on the irrigation, start planning for spring planting. Normal things. Quiet things. The kind of life he'd wanted all along. Behind him, in the gathering darkness, the past settled into its proper place. Not forgotten, not erased, but no longer controlling everything. Caleb Vance, rancher, former tracker, reluctant fighter, stood on his porch and let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he'd earned the right to rest. The territory would face other threats, other crises, other moments when someone would need to stand up against corruption and violence. But that someone didn't always have to be him. He'd done his part, paid his dues, proved that empires built on greed and violence were fragile things, that ordinary people, when pushed hard enough, could push back, that corruption couldn't survive the light of truth, and he'd learned something about himself in the process, that walking away from violence didn't make you weak, that building something was harder than destroying it, that the real strength was choosing peace when you had every reason to choose war. Those lessons had cost him blood and sleep and the quiet he'd worked so hard to find, but they'd also given him something back, a purpose, a reminder that he was more than his worst moments, that redemption wasn't a place you reached but a choice you made every day. He went inside, lit a lamp, and sat down to write, not for publication, not for history, just for himself. A record of what had happened, what he'd learned, what he hoped would never be forgotten. That power unchecked always led to corruption. That silence in the face of injustice was its own kind of crime. That ordinary people had more strength than they knew, if they could find the courage to use it. And that sometimes the greatest victory wasn't in fighting, it was in knowing when to stop fighting. He wrote until his hand cramped and the lamp burned low. Then he put the pages away, climbed into bed, and for the first time in weeks, slept without nightmares. Morning came soft and quiet. Birds singing, horses moving in the barn. The ordinary sounds of a life continuing. Caleb stood at his window, coffee in hand, watching the valley wake up. Somewhere out there, Rebecca was chasing her next story. Tom was keeping redemption safe. The federal marshals were prosecuting the corrupt officials. The world kept turning. And he was here, still breathing, still standing, still choosing, every day, to be something other than what violence had tried to make him. That choice, simple, unglamorous, easily forgotten, was his real victory. Not the bodies he'd left behind. Not the empire he'd helped destroy. Not the legend people would tell about the Reaper who came back from the dead. Just the choice. Every morning. To build instead of break. To protect instead of punish. To let the past be past, and face the future with open hands instead of clenched fists. It wasn't dramatic, wasn't the ending people expected, but it was real, and it was enough. Caleb finished his coffee, set the cup down, and went outside to start his day. There was work to do, there always was, but it was his work, his choice, his life, and that, more than anything else, was worth fighting for.